Welcome to your in-depth monthly astrology overview and zodiac forecast for December 2025. I'm going to share with you some of the standout themes of the month ahead, then on screen the event chart right at the beginning of December, which always provides an influential backdrop for the following period. I'll then go through each of the key influences in detail, frame by frame, to give a clear picture of what we can collectively expect. Please stay with me. I'll then go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell, and a very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it to continue to thrive. We have found that over 50% of people who regularly enjoy my videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please help the channel to continue to grow. Your comments and likes are also greatly appreciated. Now we're heading closer to 2026, and you can watch your free deep dive video for each of the 12 signs by clicking on the link beneath this video. There's also an overview for the collective view for the year ahead too, which you can enjoy. My new website at patrickarundell.com is really shaping up. Please join us. You can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. But also I feel a lot of the astrology and horoscope websites are quite generic and bland. There's a lot of very unique and individual information and content on patrickarundell.com. Come along, it would be great to have your company. So as we come into this new month, the energy of Sagittarius, which is very much about expansion, freedom, independence, but with Mars in the mix, very much about thrust and adventurism, it has been joined by the more delicate relating energies of Venus, which moved into the sign just as the cosmic curtain came down on November. But they're going to be joined by Mercury returning back into the sign of Sagittarius on the 11th. And if you recall, Mercury had made its way into Sagittarius previously at the end of October before the retrograde took it back into the sign of Sagittarius. So that Sagittarius energy is really going to be building up this month, but there will be a shift as the month goes on to more Capricornian energy. But what we've got is the players in the sign of Pisces are going to be incredibly influential, and it's not just Neptune and Saturn, it's also the point of destiny, the North Node. And the reason for that is we're going to have a full moon on the 4th in the buzzy sign of Gemini, which is very much to do with quick communication. So how will that nodal axis feed into that event? I need to share that with you. We are going to see Neptune going direct on the 10th, having started its retrograde on July the 4th. Mercury, as I mentioned, returns to Sagittarius on the 11th, but the 15th sees Mars move into its exaltation in Capricorn. What's the implications of that? We're also going to see the new moon in Sagittarius on the 20th, but it's an incredibly complex new moon. It's very late again at 28 degrees, the third successive new moon at 28 degrees of a series of 6, but it is going to be clashing with Neptune and Saturn in Pisces. What will the impact be? And as the month goes on, we are going to see, after the clash between Mars, Saturn and Neptune in the first 11 days, the Sun in a right angle with that duo in week 3. But then as Venus moves deeper into Sagittarius, she's going to get into a right angle with them as well. So this month is really intriguing. And of course we are going to have the winter solstice on the 21st. The Sun returns to Capricorn. Ordinarily, that's a wonderful event, ushering in Cardinal Quadrant 4, the last of the 4 sections of the Western tropical calendar. But this year, guess what? It's conflicted by Neptune, and that again can be very complex. Now we are going to see Venus playing catch up with the Sun and also Mars on the 24th, so the latter part of the month does have that much more Capricornian vibe. But because of the energy of the 12th zodiac sign of Pisces competing with the ninth, we're going to see a lot of amplification. Our sensitivities are going to be very heightened, but also I think because Sagittarius can be about publishing, it can be about broadcasting, it can be about international affairs, it can be about the rule of law. I feel a lot of things that have been hidden out of sight can come more fully into the open as this month goes on. So on the screen now, I'm going to share the event chart right at the beginning of December. But just to say, if you want to order your personal forecast for next year, you can do so now and get 30% off, get the rest of this year free, but also get your life roadmap report, which gives us stunning insights into the patterns that have played out in our lives so far. And a combination of the two helps us to plan our moves more shrewdly in the months ahead. You also get my free gift of your written general love Chinese and Indian forecasts for each of the 12 zodiac signs when you receive your charts. Please see below for more. So on the screen now is the event chart right at the beginning of the month, and you can see the two luminaries are on good terms, both in fire signs. The Sun, of course, in Sagittarius at 9:02, the Moon at 13:27 in the sign of Aries. So that thrust that comes from fire, but also passion, is very pronounced. And if we look at the position of Venus just back into the sign of Sagittarius, in a wonderful alliance with Pluto, where we have a connection to someone, but particularly where we may share values. We enjoy being in a collective. It may be where we can give each other room and freedom, but still find ways to collaborate. Those energies or those type of relationships could do very well this month for sure. But we do have the position of Mercury just still tucked up in the sign of Scorpio, but it's just into the third decan, so that's sub-ruled by the moon. So there could be some heightened emotions right at the start of this month, I feel, and you can see there's Mars at 19 degrees is soon going to speed up and come into a right angle with the positions of Saturn and Neptune. In fact, through the first 11 days, if you recall, that's going to be the case, and that can be very testing, because Mars in Sagittarius is one of the most free-spirited locations for this planet to be. It doesn't like to be inhibited or blocked, and of course the energy in the 12th zodiac sign, which can be what we don't necessarily obviously see, can be about containment or even disguise or distortion or dishonesty with Neptune there. So just be aware that that can be part of the themes of this month. But on the 4th, I mentioned about the full moon, and the full moon is in the quick moving sign of Gemini, but the moon in Gemini is a bit lost. It's known as being in peregrine, so there's no essential dignities, and because the sign is an air sign and very logical, the moon's much more sensory. It's happier in a water sign or in Taurus where it's exalted, so it doesn't quite know how to be, because the moon needs to feel, Gemini needs to articulate. So what we have here is the potential for a lot of conversation over the following 2 weeks. But what we do have is the T squared to the south and the north node, but particularly the north node, the point of destiny. So I think this just increases the potential for a lot of heated conversation, but bit by bit that Pisces energy is likely to tease into the open things that some people might want to keep very hidden, particularly with Neptune going direct on the 10th. Because disguise can be very much Neptune's mode of operandi, so it can be very much to do with a mistiness, an opaqueness. It's not easy to cut through and get to what the nub of a situation is. But as I mentioned before, as Mars moves forward, Mars very much about the free spirit in Sagittarius, can be very athletic, but actually if we try to do too much, whether it's eat too much Christmas pudding, too much shopping, or we're pushing ourselves too hard at work, or we're standing up for our point of view, I think the right angle with Saturn and Neptune can be very draining through that first period of the month, particularly in week 2 as Mars is in a more exact square with them. On the 11th, Mercury does switch back into Sagittarius, but has to be said, for the 3rd year running, it's going to end the year in Sagittarius, but it's not its favourite location. It is in its detriment here. And it's important to understand that even if we try to clarify things, as the month draws to a close, Mercury is also getting caught up in the difficult relationship of Neptune and Saturn. Now, ironically, Saturn does forge a very constructive link to Jupiter pretty well the whole of this month. Because of the retrograde to Jupiter and because Saturn's starting to step forwards, they are breaking free of each other a little bit. But of course they had been on really seriously not good terms for the last year and a half until about a month ago. So if there is something that you're working towards where you're using patience and discipline, but a degree of optimism and expansion that's well thought through, it can make progress. So that Sagittarius energy can be a bit wilder. It doesn't really like any kind of constraint. If you are going to be travelling anywhere, I think it's worth understanding that there could be hidden things that come up, particularly with Neptune and Saturn, perhaps all the way, unfortunately, to sabotage as far as technological systems are concerned, which could have an impact on travellers over the festivities. So really important to make sure that you've got a very robust plan just in case things don't go exactly to plan. But Mars moving into Capricorn is an intriguing one because as it does, it's still going to be in contact with the square. But Mars in Capricorn is great if you are a business person. And towards the end of this month, does give us a chance to use perhaps the enthusiasm that comes from the Sagittarius energy in a more grounded and constructive way. But we've got a new moon on the 20th, and this new moon in Sagittarius is also clashing with Neptune and Saturn. I can't underestimate at all really that if there is elements of exaggeration all the way to, obviously we do read things these days that can be created by states, propaganda that's designed to stand up for a particular narrative, and that kind of stuff can really crowd in and compete for our attention right through this month. But also in the more broad stream political world, I think there is going to be a battle of philosophies that's going to play out, and this particular new moon is going to be part of it. But of course Sagittarius can be about travel, and if you are jetting off for some winter snow or sun, again vital that you really have planned everything meticulously well. And on the 20th, Lilith moves from the deep and intense Scorpio into the free-spirited Sagittarius. I will do a special on that one, but it's followed on the 21st by that winter solstice. So the fourth seminal moment of the whole year, really, if we're thinking about Western tropical astrology, because this takes us all the way to the spring equinox. So this 13-week period of backdrop, really important. And that grounding energy of Capricorn is actually something that I think we can all really appreciate. Now, with Venus playing catch up with the Sun on the 24th and also with Mars, I feel the more traditional features of the festivities can call out to many of us. As much as, enjoying spending money on loved ones or going somewhere different, having some escapism can be part of it. Just really appreciating what we've got, maybe something that Capricorn energy is asking us to remember. And that brings us to the end of the month and the cusp of a new year. As I mentioned, please join me to watch your deep dive video for each of the 12 zodiac signs by clicking on the link beneath this video. But please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 signs now. So Aries, your monthly forecast for December begins with, on screen now, your ruler Mars in the adventurous sign of Sagittarius. But you can also see you've got Black Moon Lilith, the Sun and Venus. And that collective can certainly give you an appetite to change things up, to be a little bit more spontaneous. And if you are someone who likes to move around at this time of the year, the chances are you're going to want to make that happen. But in a deeper way, I feel there is a shift going on in your situation, which is seeing certain parts of your life big strands really come into a close, which will become very obvious to you by the middle of February as Saturn completes its circuit through the sign of Pisces and moves back into your zodiac sign. That's a real new beginning. So this energy at the start of December could be enticing you to start setting in process the things that will represent your new future. So there's two different opposite energies. Part of it could be a wind down, another part of it very expansive and daring. What's it going to be? Because some of that energy from the past, or even your lower physical vitality, may temper some of the hopes that you've got that are starting to develop with that stellium of energy in Sagittarius, which does like to do things in a different way. It can be very resentful of any restrictions and obligations. If you feel locked in to a situation where you feel your options are rather limited, a bit like if you would the Eight of Swords in the tarot, that's something you need to work hard at trying to overcome in terms of how you approach things. So a little bit of juggling is going to be needed this month. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link below this video. If you do feel that you're at peace with things that have happened in your past, that a job you used to have or a relationship that you used to be involved with is no longer part of who you are, and you're very much on the front foot, wanting to do something in a much more exciting and dynamic way, for sure you can make these energies in Sagittarius work for you fantastically well. But all of this is going to feed into a big conversation that you have around the time of the full moon of the 4th. It's in Gemini, and it could give you a lot of desire to move, actually physically move around. If you find yourself wanting to be more physically active, not a surprise at all. And the position of the North Node in particular does inform that full moon in a potent way. So that 12th house energy in Pisces, watery, emotional, very much to do with culmination, very much in contrast to the lively, vivacious energy of the moon in Gemini and that more expansive sun energy in Sagittarius. So even if you do decide you want to meet up with people, be more social, get into the festivities, some way or somehow or another there could be things linked to your past, whether it's memories, whether your dreams are very vivid, whether it's some things that affected you from your past that are still present in the here and now. They can be very powerful this month, despite the fact that Neptune does go direct on the 10th. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which helps you to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far. The combination of the two will help you to plan your moves in the months ahead so much more effectively. 30% off, free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for each of the 12 signs. Please see the link below for more. On the 11th, Mercury returns to Sagittarius, which it vacated on the 19th of November. And Mercury, of course, is about communication in the sign of Sagittarius. It could be to do with booking tickets, could be buying stuff online if you're looking for some last minute Christmas gifts. But Mercury here is not at its best because it tends to be caught up with the excitement of the big picture and finds details rather irritating. So just be conscious of that. But Mars, your ruler, does move into the most ambitious part of your chart on the 15th. And if you are quite at peace about what you want to evolve around and you're heading towards new targets, I think at this point in the month you could start to gain traction. It's just on the 20th, the new moon in Sagittarius, ordinarily one of the best new moons of the whole year for you, because very much in keeping with that fire energy, very passionate, very much in the moment, exciting, all the stuff that you can be when you're on top form. Guess what? We have Neptune and Saturn applying to that position of the moon, just like the new moon, just like we did earlier in the month when your ruler Mars was grating against them too. So as much as you may want to show that thrust early in the month or from the new moon, somehow or another, something could just seem to conspire to not let it happen quite as rapidly as you would like. But then on the 21st we have the winter solstice, and that ushers in cardinal quadrant 4, and that desire to focus on your ambitions for the new year is going to show up over the festivities, even if you want to have a good time. But then it's Venus's time to come into conflict with Neptune and Saturn. If there are issues in a relationship context particularly which haven't really been addressed, they may need to be looked at. It may be impossible to keep moving away from accepting that a tender subject may need to be really examined, and escapism won't necessarily provide a solution. So if there are some challenges around a sensitive matter, something that has been kept rather quiet or confidential, I think this is a month where you could find yourself needing to circle back and deal with that before you can really move forwards. But then in the latter part of the month, undoubtedly really, the energy in the sign of Capricorn is going to see you thinking much more actively about next year. And if you are someone who has got your own enterprise, you know, you're very excited about what you want to achieve for the new year, that can be a big part of what you're discussing and sharing with people over the festivities. But if you're not quite sure what you want to do, if what you used to do has changed because through technology or circumstances, you've relocated, family changes, whatever, I feel that's the theme that you take into the new year. How can you really qualify what you need to do for your future? And I feel as we come to the end of this year, it is going to be very, very conscious of Saturn and Neptune still, because they are moving into your sign. Neptune the end of January, Saturn the middle of February, as I mentioned before, and that will release you in some ways to start moving forwards. But I feel if there is any kind of spillover from the past or any kind of legacy issues that aren't quite completely resolved, you need to embrace them, hold them, take them to you, and try to work out what it is that might just be stopping you moving forwards at the speed of light, which is you when you're on absolutely the best of form. So Taurus, your monthly forecast for December begins with, on screen now, the event chart. The moon's in a tender part of your chart, the 12th house. Could make you reminisce as we go into the new month, or think very deeply about a close personal relationship, particularly with the sun diving deep in the atmospheric 8th house for you. But the host is very much about knowledge, so you could be thinking about certain associations, perhaps even certain investments. Your ruler Venus has moved into that area too. If you are in a relationship and you both want the same things from your future, I don't feel this month is going to necessarily knock you off course, but you could find yourselves chaffing a little bit, perhaps around your priorities. But if you are in a time where you do have very different value systems, those could show up quite strongly. Perhaps it's just around your friendships. Maybe some of the people each of you hangs around with doesn't quite work. Perhaps makes you feel a little bit threatened in some way or another. The reason for this is there's such a lot of energy in the 8th house. That can be very intense. It can be very much to do with things like possessiveness, control, leverage, the dark arts, if you like. Not necessarily in your case, it may be what you find yourself receiving. And the reason why that energy can come up more in a more pronounced way is through the first couple of weeks of the month, Mars, the planet of passion, which is very passionate in the 8th house, is clashing badly with Saturn and Neptune in your 11th house of friendship. If you're single, it's possible that at Christmas function you could find yourself really drawn towards a particular person who's got quite an intense aura about them, but that makes them all the more intriguing. But if you are tempted by an illicit or clandestine relationship this month, just know it could have consequences. And it's not just Mars that clashes with Saturn and Neptune, it's also going to be the Sun in week 3, and then Venus is going to clash with them too. If there are secrets in a relationship that you're involved in, those too could surface. But if we go back to the start of the month, despite the moon being in a sheltered location, Mercury, the communicator, does start this month in your sector of relating. And your desire may be to connect well with people. And the full moon, which occurs on the 4th, is complex in a way because it may be around money that some kind of tension does start to show up, because the moon in Gemini is a very quick energy. For you, it's about the second house, everyday money. So it may just be down to the festive budget when it comes to gifting. And because the nodal axis is applying to this particular lunation, the more emotional side of things, as much as the factual side, so it's almost like the perception is something that you need to discuss, because Gemini is very much about the conversation. And because of the energy of the Sun, Mars, and also your ruler Venus in your 8th house, if someone is evasive or does feel a bit controlling, that can create a lot of frustration for you. So if a relationship hasn't been working quite so well, and suddenly it feels that even over money you can't quite agree on what to do for Christmas, that may get you concerned about whether this will work for that longer term. However, Neptune does go direct on the 10th, which will help to dissipate some of the confusion, and Mercury moves back into the sign of Sagittarius on the 11th. Now, the great thing about Mercury in this part of your chart is it helps you to be more penetrative in your thinking, but details count. Sagittarius and Mercury can be a little bit counterintuitive for taking the time with details. It can be impatient, but on the 15th, Mars does move into an excellent location for you. But what I would say, as Mars is followed by the Sun later on the 21st, and Venus, your ruler, on the 24th, moving into Capricorn, if a relationship is just too enclosing, too restricting, too much drama, too much politics, of whatever kind of tie it might be. It could be around a group situation or some friends. If there's politics or backbiting, it's something in the last 10 days of this month you'll really want to separate yourself from and create a little bit more individual space and independence. Also, I think you could find yourself planning some travel earlier in the month that actually takes place later in the month. On the 20th, we have a new moon. But just before then, on the 17th, Mercury does emerge from its post-retrograde shadow, which does help if there is any bookings that you need to do. But this is a new moon, which ordinarily would see you go into the end of the year keen to really make the most of the resources you've got, or be very conscious of who you want to be much more invested in, and perhaps the situations you want to separate yourself from. But this one also is clashing with Neptune and Saturn. And because they're in the part of your chart to do with your higher values, your connection to others, your network, and some of those can just be strained, I feel. But part of it could be because Neptune can distort, it can confuse, and sometimes it can see us think the worst, particularly with Saturn there. If there are certain friends who are quite clingy or perhaps a bit into negativity, energetically I think you can be much more conscious of those type of folks. So on the 21st, with the winter solstice, that's really reminding you that you're at your best when you can at times push outside your comfort zone. Your appreciation of what you know and regularity is the stuff of astral law. But over the last 7 years, with Uranus's help, and also further back to 2008 with Pluto's help, you have been experimenting a lot more, and you have a chance to do that in the last 10 days of this month. So if something has felt enclosing, just too bogged down, a bit heavy, you need a change of scene, you even want to spend Christmas in a different location, do you know, if you do, I think it will be like a breath of celestial air, because to surf the intensity and complexity of the first 3 weeks of this month, you do need robust relationships, robust boundaries. You need to know what you stand for and where you want to really give of yourself. And if that's not reciprocated in the way you really want and makes you think, will this work for the future? I think, unfortunately, despite the turn of the year, there's a part of you that may want to enter into year 2026 much more in an escapist mode, creating much more independent space. So if people want a lot from you, they have to give you a lot. And I think that's the key early in the month, but they also have to give you permission to have a little bit of your own space too. And that's more of the picture as we come towards the end of the year. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link below this video. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which helps you to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far. The combination of the two will help you to plan your moves in the months ahead so much more effectively. 30% off, free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for each of the 12 signs. Please see the link below for more. Gemini, your December 2025 forecast begins with a collective of energy in the sign of Sagittarius, your opposite sign on the screen now. You can see the event chart, including the sun, which forges a lovely link to the moon in the sign of Aries. So both fire signs can just prime you up to take action if you want to meet up with people and enjoy the run up in terms of the festivities and just get into the Christmas spirit. But having had Venus move into this part of your chart as November came to a close is really auspicious if you would really like to meet someone special. Now, I know that this time of year can be very busy, somewhat hectic, and not necessarily the time when you will have an opportunity to have some quality time. But don't be surprised if there is some kind of mesmeric connection. But ironically, Mars, the planet of assertion, is also in the sign of Sagittarius and really can fiercely protect its independence. And if you're not really looking to give your individuality away, then Mars will help you to keep your boundaries in place. But there are all sorts of relationships, not just those of a personal kind. And the relationships we have with our parents, our line manager, the company we work for can all come under the astral microscope in a really big way this month. Venus gives you a chance to use diplomacy in order to forward what you want to achieve, but also Mars can help you to protect your position and where necessarily be more combative or even more competitive. But I feel some power issues may come up this month. Now, there is a full moon in your sign on the 4th, but it is intersected by the very emotional, spiritual energies of the North Node in the sign of Pisces. And so therefore, whatever you're discussing or thinking about around a relationship, there may be someone who wants to advise you or is open to guide you, or you yourself may be thinking more about how your relationship fits into your world in terms of your parents perhaps, or in terms of your goals and aspirations. But if you do meet someone in the following 2 weeks, it doesn't quite seem to meet exactly the formula that you had in mind, I wouldn't dismiss them. But what I feel is really important is as we go deeper into that early part of the month, Mars, as it heads forwards in Sagittarius, comes into an extremely abrasive right angle with Saturn and a dreamy drifting right angle with Neptune. If there is a relationship which isn't working very well, if you don't feel that someone's very respectful, or there isn't a kind of fair balance between who steers or who works with collaboratively with the other person, I think that could be quite an issue. And maybe also goodwill could break down. Now, Neptune, which has been in retrograde since the 4th of July and been causing mischief, does go direct on the 10th, which helps, and Mercury, your ruler, does move back into your 7th house on the 11th. Now, for sure, Mercury is not that happy in Sagittarius, but it can still have its benefits, not least a desire for knowledge, conversation. So if something has got a bit stuck with Saturn and Neptune squaring up to Mars, or frustration has mounted, I would try to keep the lines of communication open. Now, on the 15th, Mars dives deep, moves out of that 7th house and goes into the 8th. And if you are wanting to transform your financial picture, certainly next year, the latter part of this month is going to give you a lot of celestial tools in order to plan things ready to launch into 2026 in really good order. But what we are going to see on the 17th is Mercury end its post-shadow period. So some of the things that have got confused really for some time really can start to resolve themselves, and that can be very helpful, which brings us to the new moon of the 20th. Now, new moons in the 7th house can be very positive for relationships ordinarily, but this one, like Mars before it, squares up with the limiting Saturn and sometimes the deceiving and deceptive Neptune. If you are, for example, wanting to discuss a contract, a pay rise, or a job with someone influential, and they don't really seem to be tuning in to what you do in a very collaborative or cooperative way, that can really irritate you a great deal, quite rightly. But the Sun's arrival in Capricorn on the 21st, with the winter solstice ushering in cardinal quadrant 4, is significant because that too is squaring off to Neptune. So a little bit of distortion is possible through this month, but is it you that needs to make sure that your message is ultra clear? If you're the one who's wanting to be in charge of any kind of relationship and be the top dog, that's something that someone else can resist. But the Sun moving into the 8th house points towards the fact that something may need to evolve. It's going to be followed by Venus on the 24th. If you have encountered someone earlier in the month and there has been an electric connection, this relationship could really hot up before the end of the year. And also in an existing relationship, even if there have been some disagreements, things can get deeper and more intimate. But Venus, just before it moves into Capricorn itself, clashes with Neptune and also Saturn. So this power dynamic that's represented by these Pisces energies, whether it is the North Node, Saturn or Neptune, they all have very different energies. The North Node's karmic, mystical, Saturn's very much to do with structures, can be to do with your work world, can be to do with your professional goals and expectations. Neptune can be very much to do with our imagination, our dreams, but not always very much to do with reality. Now, Saturn may help to check that tendency to distortion that Neptune has, but when it comes to all sorts of relationships, I think this early part, the first 2/3 of the month, it's really important that you work very hard in trying to be as clear as possible and as sharp around your listening skills as much as saying what you want. And Mercury returning to your 7th house on the 11th will be a helpful factor, not least because Mercury from the 12th to the 16th is going to forge a very positive angle, one that will help you in its link to Pluto to be very penetrative in trying to unpick anything that does feel a bit confusing or blocked. But in the latter part of the month, as you prepare yourself to launch into the new year, I feel that something's evolving deeply within you. Pluto was moving through the 8th house for you from 2008 and until obviously the latter part of November 2024. So you've had a lot of experience of the transformational energies of the 8th house. But I think if you are someone who's quite entrepreneurial, or you're wanting to marshal your resources in a very shrewd way, your instinct and savvy for anything to do with marshalling those assets skillfully is really going to be emphasized. But if a relationship does go through a bit of a bumpy patch earlier in the month, if it does make it towards the latter part of the month and the year, it could get very passionate, but also very much more invested. So it's an intriguing month, to be honest, and it really is a little bit of a split. But it's important to understand where you want to feel respected and make sure you stand in your power. But it's also important to know where to give way a little bit and to show some spirit of of compromise and collaboration, and that's really the message of this month. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link below this video. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which helps you to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far. The combination of the two will help you to plan your moves in the months ahead so much more effectively. 30% off, free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for each of the 12 signs. Please see the link below for more. Cancer, your December 2025 forecast begins with a cluster of energy in the part of your chart to do with life's practicalities. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart, and that includes the sun. Now you can see the position of your ruler, the moon, is very high in the sky. So you'll feel this could be quite close to the surface as you come into December, but not in a bad way. If you're wanting, for example, even at this late part of the year, to consider what you might do around your job or employment prospects for 2026, I think you could be in some ways pushed a little bit to become much more conscious of what seems very onerous to you, what's burdensome, and what really speaks to the part of your nature that would set you free, because your nature is very much to do with having a soul purpose. And if you look at the position of Jupiter in your sign, it may be in retrograde, but it does forge a very constructive link to Saturn in the 9th house of your chart. So your knowledge or your desire to expand your world, if it in any way just seems crushed by people's expectations of what you are going to do for them, whether it is to do with colleagues or the nature of your exact role, or it is to do with your home organisation, the domestic chores and so forth. If you do just feel it's all a bit onerous early in this month, I think the full moon, which occurs on the 4th and forges a T-square with the nodal axis, particularly the point of destiny, the North Node in Pisces, is just reminding you of what your philosophies are, because your philosophies are very important, particularly your values, to what can guide you this month. And I feel that there is the potential to feel really quite compromised right into December. And the reason for that is that as Mars moves forwards from the position it starts the month, which can give you extra stamina, as it moves forwards, it pretty soon comes into an abrasive right angle with Saturn. Now Saturn can be about restriction, and Mars in Sagittarius is definitely a freedom lover. So if you're not really enjoying what you do within those daily routines, then I feel that Saturn makes you much more conscious of that, and that could show itself through low energy. Now I know it's a very busy time of the year, particularly if you have children. There's all their events. There's can be meetups and social events, of course, to do with the festivities, and everyone finds this part of each year at times rather demanding. But ordinarily Mars would have given you a boost, but because it comes into that right angle, Neptune can dissipate the vitality of Mars, Saturn can restrain. And just trying to keep everyone happy just may feel like a little bit of an empty process. But on the 10th, Neptune, which has been retracing its steps since July the 4th, of course it's now back into Pisces, that does go direct, which is good, because if there has been some confusion that's been quite powerful this year, it wouldn't be a surprise. It might have been about your values, it could have been around your work, but the 11th sees Mercury return to the sign of Sagittarius. Not its favourite location, but if you do need to apply a bit more precision to cut through the fog that can come from Neptune's square with Mars, that will surely help. But also you are going to see on the 15th Mars move into your opposite sign. And if you are encountering at this part of the month people who do seem to expect a lot of you, and maybe pile more and more responsibilities on you. The great thing about Mars on the 7th house, cuz, is it can help you to assert your boundary in a much more assertive way. And although we have Mercury emerging from its shadow on the 17th, I feel at this point of the month it's the Sun which starts to square off with Saturn and Neptune, replacing Mars. And that also can be very complex, because the Sun in the sign of Sagittarius is a freedom. It's a freedom lover, but the 6th house for you is about those obligations, responsibilities and chores. So that in itself is a conflict. And because of the square with the part of your chart that is to do with your desire to do as you wish, to be more spontaneous, to have variety, any kind of onerous routine could really be testing. So it's a new moon which could ask you to think very carefully as you plan your New Year's resolutions, if you do that, about changes you could make in terms of how much exercise you get, what you're eating and drinking. Little changes can be actually very important and very helpful. Think of virtue at this stage of the month, even if you do feel penned in by different demands. But the 21st is going to see the winter solstice, which for you is very constructive, because that's your sector of relating as well, but it is afflicted by Neptune. So the next 3 months through to the spring equinox could still see you a little bit confused, particularly about professional relationships. But it's Venus's turn at this stage of the month to clash with Saturn and Neptune. And it may feel that whatever you try to do to please people, it's never going to be enough. And that can be very deflating. But Venus follows the Sun and Mars into your 7th house. But Venus loves being in the 7th house. Okay, she's a bit more pragmatic in the sign of Capricorn, but I feel the last 10 days of this month can remind you of the connections that are truly important to you. Because if earlier in the month it has felt like a bit of a futile process, trying to spin so many plates, and even if you have been actually spinning loads of plates, perhaps more than many other people, not really feeling appreciated or recognised for that, or just feeling totally crushed, that soul expression which is so enriching to you, if that's not really featured, I think the latter part of December can just remind you of who you need to link with. It doesn't have to be romantic, but if you are wanting to connect with someone, if that's something that does appeal to you, the chances of a clinch under the mistletoe are definitely increased by Mars and Venus being in your 7th house along with the Sun. But as you come to the end of this year, I think what you're going to be thinking about a lot as you prepare yourself for 2026 is greater equilibrium and balance between what you need to protect and represent as an individual and where you need to connect and collaborate with others. Because I think the chances are the early parts of this month are going to show up for you what's simply no longer working. You know, you can't pour from an empty jar. And having Saturn and Neptune in your 9th house come into the end of their huge journeys, Neptune 165 years on the 26th of January, Saturn 29.5 years on the 14th of February. These are big endings for you. Big endings in terms of your philosophies, your desire to travel, anything to do with higher education. And as you enter into a new cycle for the longer term, obviously we had a brief sojourn earlier in the year with both Neptune and Saturn in your sector of success and work and ambition. I feel you're going to be much more in tune with what you really want to do. And if there were some breakthroughs, or you raised your profile, or you had some successes but it didn't quite work out as you wanted, you'll be much better prepared by the time we get to the middle of February from the practice that you had last time. But one of the things that those along with the North Node that Saturn and Neptune are asking you to be conscious of is you'll need to be in touch with what really is your values. And if those values are too conflicted this month by the demands that limit your scope to be a free spirit, that's really the theme of this month. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link below this video. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which helps you to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far. A combination of the two will help you to plan your moves in the months ahead so much more effectively. 30% off, free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for each of the 12 signs. Please see the link below for more. Your monthly forecast for December begins with Venus having joined up with Mars and the Sun in the 5th house of your scope, which has a kind of Leonian echo. The fire sign of Sagittarius is the host, which is very much about taking the initiative, being very positive and dynamic, but your natural charisma can be turned up to max by this trio of energies. It's just that on the 4th, the full moon in the sign of Gemini, which is very much about quick communications around your network, and it's T-squared to the position of the North Node, just could tease into the open those relationships you have, whether it is socially, with friends, even with colleagues, where you may feel at some level rather obliged to someone. And if that is the case, perhaps even in a romantic situation, if a tie has become a little bit heavy or has some politics around it, as Mars squares off to both Saturn and Neptune in the early part of the month, that part of you that wants to be a bit more of a free spirit can be challenged by the other person's expectations, all the way if it feels rather controlling. Now on the 10th, Neptune does end a long retrograde, which began on the 4th of July. And if there has been some confusion over shared finances or resources, that can clarify to some degree, but on the 11th, Mercury returns to Sagittarius too. Now, it left on the 19th of November, and for you, Mercury moving into the 5th house just gives you that extra cutting edge when it comes to demonstrating your sense of playfulness and also your sense of mischief and fun, because whilst it went back into Scorpio through its retrograde, you may have felt a little bit more introspective, even very sensitive, but found it hard to express how you really felt. Now on the 15th, Mars moves out of Sagittarius and into the sign of Capricorn. For you personally, I feel this can be a real asset. It will need to shrug off the limiting energy and the draining energy of Neptune and Saturn, but as it picks up pace in Capricorn, it's encouraging you before the year's end to get serious about being more virtuous about some of the things you want to achieve next year, whether it's around your work, whether it's around your diet or exercise. But what it will give you almost immediately is some extra stamina to cope with the pressures that this part of the year often throws up. Now Mercury also emerges from its post-retrograde shadow on the 17th. If there has been crosswise with someone that you're friendly with, it's an opportunity to create even greater clarity. But on the 20th, we have a new moon in Sagittarius. Now, usually each year, this is one of the most beneficial new moons for you personally. And the reason for that is that you share the fire triplicity. So very much about passion and action, but also the ruler of the sign of Sagittarius is the ruler of the second decan of your zodiac sign. So there is a mutual receptivity. There is a part of you that can be, if you give yourself permission, very daring in that more Sagittarius way. But this is a new moon that's conflicted, like Mars before it, by the draining energy of Neptune and the more limiting vibe of Saturn. If there is some politics around any association and it is having an impact on your desire to connect with certain people, or you don't feel that you can be quite as free as you want, this could really show up through this new moon. Ordinarily, new moons are wonderful for setting our intentions. You can still use it constructively. If you're a maker or a creator, or you have a brilliant idea, which it does involve using your artistry or flair, you can do so in a more practical way, particularly once the sun moves into Capricorn on the 21st with the winter solstice, followed by the planet which is very much to do with creativity, Venus. So the last 10 days of this month could see you talking about with people over the festive period the things that are really intriguing you, and also you're going to have a desire to forge the ideas you've got into something more tangible. But if you have got guests visiting you over the festive period, I think the chances are you're going to want to really give of yourself the very best. So if you're hosting, you're going to want to do it really well. But I think it's important not to push yourself too hard. Do you know Venus is going to clash with Saturn and Neptune too, just before she moves into the sign of Capricorn. So I feel that the vibe this month, particularly around shared finances, or where you want to be very invested, or where you don't want to be very invested with a particular person, initially can conflict with a part of your nature that wants to really showcase the full force of your personality power and draw in a lot of attention and fun. And if there are clinging demands or even clinging people, that can be rather inhibiting. So if a relationship has felt a little bit heavy, or someone's rather jealous or a bit possessive, and that shows up in the early parts of the month, it could test a tie all the way to whether it will continue. But in the latter part of the month, I think you're looking for equilibrium. You're looking for things to work properly. And as you prepare for the turn of the year, if you are going to set yourself some New Year's resolutions, often with the sun in Capricorn, you can do this, but I think this year with Mars's support, your appetite to really be that much more careful about what you eat and drink and the exercise you take as you burst into the new year. It's going to be a big part of your thinking, but it doesn't mean to say that you can't enjoy the festivities. I think you just may be mindful of the bigger picture of where your direction of travel lays. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link below this video. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which helps you to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far. Combination of the two will help you to plan your moves in the months ahead so much more effectively. 30% off, free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for each of the 12 signs. Please see the link below for more. So Virgo, your December monthly forecast begins with the collective of energy in the sign of Sagittarius, making you very conscious of your home, emotional and family situation, and therefore perhaps thinking also about how you can shape your plans for the month in terms of the needs of the people closest to you. But we do have a full moon on the 4th, and your professional and work situation may need to be juggled. No different there from anyone else at this time of year, but you could just feel it a little bit more keenly, not least because the North Node in your sector of relating means that there may be someone that you're needing to support in the first 2 weeks of this month. However much you lean into their needs, they may not actually feel that support in the way that you want, which could be frustrating. And that frustration can really start to mount as Mars moves forwards in the sign of Sagittarius, and it's obviously a very vigorous place for Mars to be. Mars likes action. If there are some last minute things you want to change to your home, move things around, perhaps declutter, perhaps even some late redecoration with Venus in Sagittarius, if someone close to you resists what you're trying to do with Saturn and Neptune in a square to Mars, it could create so much frustration, and that could boil over if you feel you're doing your absolute best and someone else is just not appreciating it. But the reverse could be true. It may be that someone's going to nudge you to be more attentive and tuned in to that more inner part of your situation. But Neptune, which has been in retrograde since the 4th of July, does go direct on the 10th, which is welcome. I don't think it's necessarily going to completely clarify all the distortion that may have occurred recently around certain relationships. But Mercury, your ruler, does move back into Sagittarius, which it vacated on the 19th of November, and it will be there right through to the end of the year. Now, it's not its favourite place. You like precision, you like clarity. The 4th house can be where, in terms of our emotions, with Mercury, what we think, we can find it more difficult to articulate that, or with Mars in occupancy, perhaps even be a bit more defensive, a bit niggly, or even triggered. So that's something to be conscious of. But maybe if there is a plan for the festivities that has got a bit bogged down, or someone's not quite getting it, Mercury here is definitely asking you to try to find a way to clarify things. But on the 15th, you do get a real opportunity for you personally. Each year when the sun moves back into Capricorn and we get the winter solstice, that's always great news for Virgos, because it can see you often late get into the festive spirit. But Mars being in this part of your chart this year is a real asset. Mars, of course, is very much about action. The 5th house can be about fun, and it's slowly, as it breaks away from the right angle to Neptune and Saturn, going to release you to just feel much more in the mood to engage in a more charismatic way with others. But Mercury, your ruler, does emerge finally from shadow on the 17th. That's going to be helpful in terms of clarity. But on the 20th, the new moon in your 4th house certainly asks you through the last 10 days of the year, but into the early parts of January next year, to just make sure that you're really conscious of what's important to you in terms of your immediate environment, the people that you're most invested in. And those often are our family members, but sometimes it's not. It can be friends, extended family, could be through second relationships where there are additional children, their needs. And unfortunately, on this year's new moon, Saturn and Neptune are potentially going to cause mischief again. So because they're in the part of your horoscope to do with how you connect to other people, you may find yourself at times this month, due to Mars' square initially with them, then the full moon's square to them from the 20th, you may feel that either someone's being very resistant to all the effort you're putting in, or you yourself may feel a little bit discouraged, not really enjoying your connections to others, maybe even feeling a bit dispirited. But Venus then goes on to square off to them too. And you can see it's one of those months that does hold some promise, but does have some challenges. So for you, it's about your sensitivities competing with your connection to others. But on the 21st, as the sun does return to the sign of Capricorn for the winter solstice, ushering in cardinal quadrant 4, that's definitely a good news story for you. But it too is initially conflicted by the dreamy drifting energy of Neptune. But Venus plays catch up with Mars and also the Sun on the 24th, and that's when you're really going to get into the festive spirit. And I actually feel this year, despite the struggles of earlier in the month, you could surprise yourself by how jolly and playful the festivities turn out to be, and you could be right at the heart of the action. So even if there are frustrations early on in the month, and those could be linked to a property or home matter, it may be that someone in your immediate circle isn't necessarily proven to be very easy to get along with, which could really test your patience. But I feel that as you get into Christmas week itself and the New Year celebrations, I think you're going to really shrug off some of those worldly demands and really feel much more in the mood for the mirth and joviality that's the very best of Christmas. Or if you're wanting a more peaceful and quiet time, you can indulge in your favourite films or spend time with your pets and just really give yourself permission to just let go of some of those worries that earlier in the month may have thrown up. But if you have been percolating some brilliant ideas over the last few months, one of the things I can assure you of for next year is you're going to be very determined to manifest your talent in a much more meaningful way right through 2026. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link below this video. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which helps you to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far. The combination of the two will help you to plan your moves in the months ahead so much more effectively. 30% off, free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for each of the 12 signs. Please see the link below for more. So Libra, your December monthly forecast brings sharply into focus the role of Saturn and Neptune in the part of your chart to do with your physical vitality, your work situation, life routines, but also the general demands and obligations you've been encountering over the last 2 years, in particular with Saturn's journey through that part of your chart. And as you come into this month, it's true, there is a sparkling alliance of Venus, your ruler, Mars, the planet of thrust and allure, but also the Sun in the part of your chart to do with being chatty, interactive, sociable, perfect for the festivities. They're also going to be joined on the 11th by Mercury moving back into your third house, which is an echo of its rulership of the sign of Gemini. Very quick-witted, playful, mischievous and fun. What's not to like? Well, it's just that the full moon, which occurs on the 4th, is in a part of your chart to do with bigger ideas, your connection to others and travel plans. And of course, at this time of the year, many of us are moving around, seeing different people, taking in some winter sun or perhaps some winter snow. But I feel because of the role of the North Node, particularly on the full moon, and then as the days go by, Saturn and Neptune are in a very awkward right angle with Mars. So however much you may want to be a bit freer and playful, those obligations, those responsibilities could still be dragging you down a little bit, and your physical vitality may be affected by that, to be honest. But it could also create a degree of frustration, particularly for someone who has been very supportive and helpful of other people, particularly at work. You know, if you've gone the extra mile to support colleagues to cover shifts when perhaps they've had something that they've wanted to go to that's more social, or whether there's been illness, and you've been a really good team player, if that's not rewarded as you come into the early parts of this month, I think it can create a sense of disillusionment and also frustration as well as irritation. You thrive on balance, of course. You like things to be fair, and if it's not quid pro quo, doesn't have to be an exact exchange, it's more an exchange of energy rather than particular favours. But if you feel there's more give than get, I feel this month at times can be draining. Now we are going to see Mercury emerge from its post-retrograde shadow on the 17th, followed by the new moon in Sagittarius on the 20th. So if you are wanting to dart off somewhere, that's encouraging, right? New moons, we can set our intentions, everything's going to be hunky-dory. While this one, like Mars before it, is challenged by the limiting energies of Saturn and the draining energies of Neptune. So I would say if you are wanting to do things a bit more spontaneously, free-spiritedly, very Sagittarius, have some connections and meetups with people, I wouldn't try to pack too much into your diary. I think it's important throughout this month to really prioritize the occasions, the events, or the people that you want to give your time to, because I don't feel you're going to have oodles of energy. But what you are going to get on the 15th is Mars moves into your 4th house. Now Mars loves being in Capricorn, and if there's something you want to change to your home life, it may be actually where you live. It could be renovating an existing accommodation. It may even come from a desire to redecorate, extend, refit certain elements of your situation. As you come into the last phase of this month, some of the thinking or conversations you have with loved ones, friends, when you're meeting up, you could find yourself thinking a lot more about your inner world, your closest connections. You may, if you do attend any parties, you may want to go to places that are very familiar to you. You may also want to spend time with people that you feel very safe and comfortable with. Not perhaps the most glamorous or exuberant people in your circle, more the solid citizens that you just feel really at ease with. And Mars is going to give you a push in that direction. But if you have thoughts of working from home on your own enterprise, 2026 can really sparkle for you with the thrust that Mars is going to bring, and the planning can start to shape up in the last phase of this month, not least from the 21st, when we have the winter solstice and the Sun plays catch up with Mars moving into Capricorn. But just as that's happening, Venus, your ruler itself, is challenged by Saturn and Neptune. And again, this could throw up a situation maybe around your finances, maybe around a closer personal relationship, where if you feel that you have been given a lot to people, but it's not acknowledged verbally, you're not necessarily feeling heard or seen, that's something that can really stick in your craw. But the move of the Sun is also going to make you much more aware of setting your boundaries. And then on the 24th, Venus plays catch up. If you do decide to spend time with people in the latter part of this month, I think it wouldn't be a surprise if it was in your own home, so you played host. Because the familiarity and comfort that 4th house energy wants is something that you're going to have a much greater appreciation for this year in particular. And as you wind down this year, Libra, do know that next year can be very, very exciting, particularly for your social situation, perhaps even for your romantic situation as well. But with Saturn and Neptune moving from that sector of responsibility and back into your sector of relationship, if there are certain people in your world who you feel have been taking you somewhat for granted, there's going to be a big shakeout even in the first 6 weeks of this new year. And I feel some people are going to be really surprised that if there isn't that respect and appreciation for you showing up this month, the pushback from you may not be immediate. You may use a degree of subtlety, you may use a degree of charm, but I feel a much firmer part of your nature will be much clearer to be seen by the middle of February. And if there are people who are more fair weather in terms of friendships, or there are colleagues who are perhaps just leaning on you without really respecting what you do, I think you're going to be much more assertive as you come into this new year, and it's going to be a very good thing for you indeed. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link below this video. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which helps you to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far. The combination of the two will help you to plan your moves in the months ahead so much more effectively. 30% off, free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for each of the 12 signs. Please see the link below for more. Scorpio, your December 2025 forecast begins with Venus, the planet of money, but also desire, moving into the most lovely central part of your situation as November came to a close, joining up with your traditional ruler Mars, very much about desire, and the thrust of the Sun, all in Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is very spontaneous, it's a fire sign, can be passionate like you, but it also resists containment. It likes to be a free spirit. So when it comes to the Christmas budget and treating people that you're close to, this combination of energies, which will be joined by Mercury again on the 11th, as Mercury emerges from your sign, of course, because of the retrograde, been going between the two, comes back into Sagittarius, which it left on the 19th of November. And that also can just push you to perhaps be as generous as possible to the people that really matter to you. But you've also got some contra influences which are tricky, so I just need to sketch those out for you. But if you're wanting to dive into the festivities, enjoy all the traditional fare to the max, and really have a jolly time, that collective of energy in Sagittarius is giving you loads of permission. But what about the full moon of the 4th? It's in the part of your scope, the 8th house, which is a kind of echo of the energy of Scorpio, but the host Mercury is of course about quick thinking, and it can be about fast conversations. But the opposition between the moon, which isn't particularly happy in the air sign of Gemini, the sun in the fiery Sagittarius, is intercepted by the North Node in the more emotional Pisces. And if you do find yourself, perhaps on the end, if you have children, if they're sort of really letting you know what their ideal gifts will be, it could be difficult to resist. But if there's someone around you that you're drawn towards, perhaps in a more alluring way, I think it's important to consider a bit of an old-fashioned dimension, and that is, do you share values with the person that you're finding so glamorous? Because if you don't, however much a fling could be on the celestial cards, there could be a glitch that's not immediately obvious. So if you're wanting to make some grand gestures, splash out, do your very best within your budget to please loved ones, I feel that Saturn and Neptune can be a little bit challenging for you, because if you're breaking your budget and in a way which is going to be costly in terms of paying for it all next year, as you come into January, a real note of reality could make it a little bit difficult to get through. Now, if your relationship situation is going well, that's not really an issue, and your finances are in trim, then why not enjoy all the giving and that goes with Christmas to the maximum. And on the 10th, Neptune does enter retrograde. If there has been confusion around your love life, but moreover limitation or reality that's really struck home over the last couple of years, because Saturn in the 5th house is not a bunch of fun, to be honest. The 5th house is supposed to be about fun, and of course Saturn is much more about the side of life where we have to be very realistic. So if you have met some headwinds around a relationship, or there's been a breakup, or your children have needed a lot of support from you over these last 24 months or so, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. And your traditional ruler Mars is in conflict with Saturn and Neptune through the early parts of this month. And if you are a little bit constrained in terms of what you can spend on people, that's something you can feel quite keenly, which is totally understandable. But I want you to know Mercury, of course, returns to house 2 on the 11th, but it's on the 15th that things really start to pick up for you, because Mars switches into the 3rd house. That's quicker. It's in the sign of Capricorn, where he loves to be. He's exalted. Now, we are going to have a new moon on the 20th. It is still in that 2nd house. If you have been working really, really hard, particularly as the sun made its way through your sign on doing something more creative, reaching out to people, pitching ideas, or selling stuff that you've created yourself, you may find that your finances do revive over the next couple of weeks. It's just that, like Mars before it, this is a new moon which is conflicted by the limiting Saturn and the dreamy distorting Neptune. So even if money does come in, I would use it rather cautiously. But I have to say, having Venus through to the 24th in your second house means that when it comes to enjoying whether it's the traditional elements of Christmas in terms of the warming drinks, the toddies that go with carol singing, or it's getting together with friends that you really can just feel very comfortable with, you will have an appreciation of those things to a greater extent because of the role of Venus. But once Mars moves, it's moving you out of the more practical dimension of money, second house, your values, second house, but also foundations, second house, and more into actually interacting. And with the arrival of the Sun on the 21st into Capricorn, joining up with Mars and the winter solstice, as you speed into the new year, I feel that you're going to take on the challenge of 2026 in a very plucky way. It's just that Venus, like the new moon and Mars before, is challenged by Saturn and Neptune. So if there is someone that you're trying to get to know as we run up to Christmas, I wouldn't put too much hope into that situation. I think it's important to stay grounded. But once we get to the 24th and Venus moves to join up with the Sun and Mars, I think you're going to be finding life a lot more interactive, a lot more convivial, and you're going to have some brilliant conversations this Christmas, I feel. And some of the people that you encounter can get you away from perhaps the worry of balancing the books, buying gifts for loved ones, or being more concerned about your self-worth and value, and just really enjoying that more chatty, interactive, playful and fun part of the festivities, whether it's traditional games or technology, chatting to people online if you're single. There could definitely be a spark with someone completely different before the end of the year. So there's lots to look forward to. So on the whole, a positive month, but just be conscious that when it comes to joy, Saturn and Neptune are up to mischief this month, and therefore your expectations need to be just lowered a little bit, and don't equate generosity with what you might get back from others, because I don't necessarily think it's going to be quid pro quo. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link below this video. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which helps you to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far. The combination of the two will help you to plan your moves in the months ahead so much more effectively. 30% off, free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for each of the 12 signs. Please see the link below for more. Sagittarius, your December 2025 forecast is definitely blessed with some celestial magic. Venus, the planet of relating, has moved into your zodiac sign as November came to a close, and combining with the Sun, but also the thrust, energy and confidence of Mars, is giving you a lot of pushing forwards when it comes to expressing your individuality and your charisma. You may give yourself a glamorous makeover in the run-up to Christmas, even if you are a dedicated follower of fashion. But there could still be some worrying energy just in the background, which is coming from Mercury being locked away in your 12th house. Well, the good news is Mercury does rejoin your sign after its retrograde on the 11th and emerges from shadow on the 17th. You also have a new moon in your sign on the 20th. Now, new moons are the annual opportunity to set our intentions, but in your case, a sign which is very much to do with vigor, energy, enthusiasm, adventure, getting on the front foot. Well, that's what the new moon gives you the chance to do. It's just that as you come into this month, as Mars inches forwards, it does forge a complex right angle with Saturn and Neptune. And it's also going to be followed by the Sun, and through that new moon in a right angle with them as well. And then Venus is also going to square off with them too. How do we deal with this? Well, I feel the clue comes as early as the 4th with the full moon. It's in your opposite sign. There may be somebody, and it could be someone in a more worldly situation, who just perhaps pushes back or reminds you that however focused you are on what's important to you, the individual, how they feel is something you need to stay mindful about. And the role of Saturn and Neptune, if we think about the big picture, Neptune right back 4 times to 2012, apart from its brief sojourn from the end of March, if you recall, this year into Aries, but it's returned back into the sign of Pisces. But back to 2012, it may have eroded some of your earlier emotional situation. It may have created some illusions. You may have quite literally suffered some leaks within your home, or perhaps your own emotional life at times has felt somewhat confusing. With Saturn joining up with Neptune in March 2003, any limitations in terms of space, which is always important to you, or around your immediate environment, whether it's neighbours or the actual location, or it's the energy within a property that you're living in. Mars has made you much more conscious of all of those things, or perhaps the demands of family, whether it's older people who need your support, or it's youngsters. I feel that part of you that's much more of a free spirit has been checked. It hasn't been so easygoing by any means. And of course Uranus, the planet of disruption, has also been in the part of your scope to do with routines. Well, Uranus doesn't do routines. All Uranus does is push us to break down what used to work, because we have to reinvent it in some kind of more novel and innovative way. So I don't think it's been particularly easy over the last couple of years broadly. And as you come into this month, yes, that part of you that can take the initiative, reach out to people, energize people, motivate people is very much to the fore. But just be aware of all the lessons you've learned about your more sensitive needs. That, for example, you have them. Because one of the parts of Sagittarius people that I really respect is your dynamism. So even if life's tough, you'll brush yourself down and go again on to the next new challenge. Your enthusiasm is infectious. But I think what Saturn and Neptune have been doing jointly is just reminding you, like everyone else, there is only so much in the tank, and you have to make sure that your inner world is working efficiently in order to manifest what you want to do more creatively. And that's really the story of this month. And if you can just accept the limitations you may have, or that some emotional involvements may not be perfect, there may be some family members who will frustrate you and so forth, I think it actually will give you a sense of peace, and you can work in a more balanced way through the energies. So the full moon that we have on the 4th could see someone being maybe a bit frustrated by something they point out. Try to receive the energy and not be defensive. Then on the 10th, Neptune goes direct. Always helpful when planets come out of their retrogrades. And then on the 11th, Mercury rejoining you. So something that perhaps has been a little bit of a worry can ease. But on the 15th, Mars moves into Capricorn. Mars here is going to be joined, of course, as usual, by the Sun on the winter solstice, and then Venus, the planet of money, self-worth, but also relationships, on the 24th. That collective towards the end of this month can actually help you to look back over these last couple of years and really evaluate what the foundation of your world is truly about. And it doesn't have to be measured on on a material basis only. We all want to make sure that we're paying the bills. We'd all like to have a surplus. We all like nice things. And you may go above and beyond to people please this month, which is a lovely thing to do. And I feel that you could actually enjoy some surprising financial fortune before the end of the year, which really brings a sense of well-being to your situation. And also you can really enjoy all the traditional fare of the season as we go into that last 10 days. But just be aware that the new moon in your sign on the 20th is challenged by Saturn and Neptune, and Venus is then challenged by them as well. So if you're trying to do something let's say, in a more individual or independent way, and not being mindful of how those closest to you feel, or perhaps you're doing something that pushes through some of your own emotional frailties or needs, that's not necessarily going to work out. And you could end up actually running out of steam quite quickly, almost like banging your toe as you're walking down the stairs. You're not going to break your leg, it's not going to stop you moving, but it can certainly make you sort of go ouch and really feel that there's some kind of resistance there. So Saturn can be about resistance, Neptune can be about dreams and confusion and what drains us. So there may be some things that don't let energy flow quite to the maximum as you would like. And of course you are at your best. I do have Mars, by the way, in Sagittarius. You're at your best when you're really going for it in the maximum way possible. But I think the lessons of the last couple of years is what you should hold very dearly to you, and that is that you're, like everyone else, have more tender needs, and that's okay. Don't judge yourself for that. And then in that latter part of the month, if you do get together with people and just share those simple but very lovely goodnesses that this time of the year can represent, that's a really lovely thing for you to do. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link below this video. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which helps you to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far. The combination of the two will help you to plan your moves in the months ahead so much more effectively. 30% off, free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for each of the 12 signs. Please see the link below for more. Capricorn, your December 2025 forecast is going to see the sun return to your sign as usual this year on the 21st, ushering in cardinal quadrant 4, the last of the quadrants of the entire tropical astrological calendar. But also Mars, the planet of thrust, desire and action, joins you on the 15th. That's brilliant. And they're going to also be joined by the lovely Venus on the 24th. So in the latter part of this month, Capricorn, you've got a wonderful opportunity to supercharge whatever you want to achieve forwards. What's not to like? It's just that right at the start of this month, there's a collective in the tender 12th house, and that includes the Sun, Mars, and the aforementioned Venus, and that can make you much more reflective. But Saturn, your ruler, and Neptune are in the chattiest part of your scope, but they're going to be applying to that posse in Sagittarius. And also the North Node in Pisces, your third house of everyday communication, interacts with the full moon of the 4th. So that couple of weeks as you run up to Christmas could see some very sensitive issues bubbling to the surface, because third house energy can be about our everyday conversations, it can be about connection to siblings, neighbours, short journeys, can be technology. Saturn can provide resistance and has done broadly for the last couple of years. Neptune can distort and drain, but because they're squaring off to the position of Mars, Mars in the 12th house can be quite turbulent. It can churn things up from deep within us that we thought we dealt with in the past, particularly of a psychological nature, but Mars can of course be about anger. So something could bubble to the surface through the first 2/3 of this month, and it may be some issues to do with people's sincerity, maybe to do with people's loyalty or lack of it. You may hear some gossip that is very hard to digest. It may be you yourself, your confidence is a little lower than ordinarily would be the case. There could be some cross wires in general. Maybe is that there are some things linked to the festive period, perhaps historically, which haven't always been easy for you. So, you know, if people passed during the festivities, or a relationship broke up, or it wasn't always a comfortable or pleasant experience getting together with family members, the echo of that energy could be felt quite strongly this year. But I want to reassure you Mars moving into your sign on the 15th will move you into the moment in a very constructive and positive way. Joined by the Sun on the 21st, then Venus. What a lovely combination. So it almost feels like this month could be split into two, if you like the sporting analogy of a game of two halves. Some parts of your past may be really winding down, but you're also going to engineer in the latter part of this month some things that you're truly excited about for your future, where you're going to take much more of a central role. You're going to be much more in touch with where you want to be inventive, dynamic, take a firm grip on your life direction, and not be so caught up and bogged down by the politics, particularly things like social media. You know, we can see how people use social media. They weaponize it by sharing photographs which can be quite excluding, or it could be that they're having a wonderful time, and if we're not, that's amplified. So a lot of those sensitivities can be amplified quite a lot this month. But what you can do with the help of Saturn and Neptune is use your language and your communication in a very temperate way. Be very careful how you express things. If there are wounding discoveries, if you do find out that someone hasn't been as honest and sincere and loyal as you would like, just know that a new dawn is really taking shape towards the end of this month. And then of course next year, on the 14th of February, your ruler moves back into Aries, where it had that brief sojourn from the 25th of May to the 1st of September, but it's going to be there for about 2.25 years. And that's a big reset around your emotional life. So if there are some people who show up this month who are frankly very disappointing, just know the more you move into your power, the more you focus on your qualities, the less you're distracted by all the noise around you, which can be very draining and lowering. Just do what's right for you. You're priming yourself up to storm into 2026 in the most fantastic of form that you can. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link below this video. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which helps you to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far. The combination of the two will help you to plan your moves in the months ahead so much more effectively. 30% off, free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for each of the 12 signs. Please see the link below for more. So Aquarius, your monthly forecast for December begins in the most sparkling, effervescent way. Venus, the relator, but also the planet of charm, has moved into the most social part of your scope, very much to do with networks, joining up with the thrust of Mars, but also the Sun. The host, Sagittarius, does have commonalities with the sign of Aquarius. You both love a degree of freedom and independence. You can both be pretty frank, and you both can connect to people in a way without too many strings and expectations. So have different types of friends, multiple types of connections with people, because you don't necessarily judge people because they're not exactly like you. And that sociability, that fraternity, to use a more American word, is going to be very much to the fore as you come into this month. And people can be drawn to your warmth, your bonhomie. But there is a full moon on the 4th. What's the significance of that? Well, it's in the sign of the social butterfly, which is Gemini. And for you, the 5th house is more about what you want to manifest as an individual. Now, usually a 5th, 11th house full moon is probably one of the more engaging and more tolerable full moons. It does suggest that there could be a little bit of a juggle. So we can't necessarily reach into every invite and meet everyone's expectations. So that could be a bit of an issue. And of course the moon in Gemini, it's not a very sentimental location. It's known as being peregrine in a more technical sense, so it's a bit unrooted. The moon wants feeling, and Gemini wants conversation. But I feel some sparkling conversations can come from that full moon. It's just that the T-square to the point of destiny, the North Node in Pisces, is reminding you of values. And that's been a big theme. For the last couple of years, your traditional ruler, Saturn, has, for the main part, been in the sign of Pisces and really given you a bit of a crash course in learning what's truly important to you, because we all have different things that give us pleasure, enjoyment, satisfaction. Having enough money to engage with those things is important, but there may have been some financial headwinds over the last couple of years, or maybe the generosity and kindness that you've extended to people with Neptune going through your second house 4 times since 212, that may have also been challenged by Saturn, which has asked you to be more realistic about your resources. But one of the things that's intriguing as this month steps on is that Mars, in that friendly sign of Sagittarius, Mars here really is very energized, very enthusiastic. But what I would say is that if you encounter some people whose values really don't chime with yours, it could be quite grating. So for example, if you're keen to raise money for a good cause in the run-up to Christmas, or you've got maybe a friend who's not as well off as other people in your circle, but there are other people who are a bit judgy about that, that's something that could exercise you. But also if someone is inclined to take your generosity for granted, that's another thing that could stand out. And as much as this part of the year is about mixing and mingling, if it's with people that you don't really have an affinity with, that won't necessarily see you enjoy the mixing and mingling as much as being with people you do. Now, Neptune going direct on the 10th will help. Mercury returning back into the sign of Sagittarius on the 11th will also help, because Mercury has been making its way through both Scorpio and Sagittarius in its retrograde season. It emerges from the shadow on the 17th, but you have been diverted recently by some professional demands, I think, and if that has got in the way of having some fun, Mercury moving back into Sagittarius will surely help. But then Mars moves into your 12th house, a tender area on the 15th, but not before it's come into a really testing right angle with Saturn and also Neptune. If you're buying anything, particularly as a Christmas gift, I would use sources to arrange that sale that you can really trust. The second house can be about money. The 11th house can be that part of you that's a bit more idealistic, very inspirational, very foresighted. But if you are wanting to get some last minute Christmas gifts, just be careful, because although Mercury is back in a friendlier location for you, it's still not its best location in terms of buying and selling things, particularly online, and especially if you're trying to book some travel, or perhaps you're buying something from a further afield. So there could be an affliction, because essentially Mars is the lesser malefic and Saturn the greater malefic, and they're not on great terms through the first 10 or 11 days of this month. And that could create an aberration. And it's important, therefore, for us all, particularly when you've got a cluster of energy in a very idealistic area and a very free-spirited sign of Sagittarius, which could see you a bit resistant to anyone's nudges of advice or viewpoints. Just be conscious there could be something that you may feel a bit conflicted about, that you're not really getting your values met at quite the level that you feel you're worth. And with Mars diving deep at the middle of the month, followed by the Sun on the 21st and also Venus, the latter part of this month is going to be much more sensitive than usual. But that doesn't disguise the fact that there is a bubbly new moon on the 20th. It is in that sociable sign of Sagittarius, but it is clashing with Saturn and Neptune. So again, the balance between money, resources, self-worth, the foundations in your life, and how you'd really like it to be, or how you'd like people to be. You may experience some people, therefore, who disappoint you in the early parts of this month. But I don't want you, as an Aquarius person, to stop being true to your credentials, what makes you special. And that can be a higher standard of being. You know, we're seeing an awful lot of negative energy being manifested in the world, which is not good for us. We all soak up all this stuff that's going on. So if there's something you feel strongly about and you want to stick with that, then that's fabulous. But we also have to be realistic about how the world truly is. So if money's a bit tight, don't be too ambitious to be a people pleaser. If you're trying to organise people around a group activity, just know that someone could be unreliable and let you down. You may become much more conscious of someone who doesn't meet your expectation at any level, and that could be very disappointing. But then from the winter solstice, and then with Venus joining up, you could find yourself hugely nostalgic in the last 10 days of this month. For some Aquarius people, there could be some surprise contact with someone from your past. Now, I think it's very important that astrologers on YouTube, for example, don't drop tropes like, oh, a face from your past is going to turn up in your life. Well, of course, it could happen. It's Christmas. You may get a message on social media. You may get a Christmas card. That's an easy one, isn't it? But it's important for astrologers to be sincere. It's only may, could, might, not will, definitely. It's not nailed on. It's possible, because the 12th house can be about thinking back retrospectively. But it could also be that you just feel much more aware of the people who are not with you as you go through the festive period. But the more traditional side of Christmas, forget the money, the spending, the gifts, just being with people that you feel really at ease with, in simpatico with, getting in nature, going for some walks by water, the 12th house energy. Capricorn, of course, is very real, you know, good food, some pleasant company, some quiet times, and maybe even some recuperation if you're off work, taking some time to just have some duvet days and really kick back, read a nice book, watch a lovely film, have a little bit of escapism and rest. Why not? It's all preparing you for what's going to be a dramatic new year, but the first solar eclipse in your zodiac sign for about 9 years, going to be occurring on the 17th of February, and you've got that to look forward to and a whole lot more. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link below this video. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which helps you to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far. The combination of the two will help you to plan your moves in the months ahead so much more effectively. 30% off, free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for each of the 12 signs. Please see the link below for more. So Pisces, your December forecast begins with a big collective in the most visible part of the sky in the sign of Sagittarius, shaping up for you personally. Now, it's late in the year, but if you have got hopes to seize a role, promote your business, start a new one, this collective at the start of December is really going to give you a chance to use your authority, Mars, but also your people skills and your diplomacy, Venus, along with the energy of the Sun, to try to raise your profile as best as possible. But there are going to be some home and family emotional considerations that show up by the full moon of the 4th in the quick-witted sign of Gemini. There may be that classic work-life balance scenario. So if you are really going for it about something that you've been manifesting for some while around a goal or ambition, or your interface in terms of your responsibilities is going up, you can't control the timing of the year, and it may be that it's so important you have to really concentrate and seize the moment. And that could mean a juggle, but it may also mean that some people close to you won't necessarily get that you do need to be very disciplined in order to promote your situation as best you can. And that full moon could bring those energies to the fore. But Mercury, the planet of communication, starts this month in a part of your chart that's to do with knowledge. And your knowledge, your expertise, or your appreciation, whether it's around property, technology, business, travel, that can be very important in the early parts of this month. What's not to like? Well, the thing is, Pisces, as this golden opportunity shows up for you, so your personal energy and physical vitality might not be equal, as it seems to you, to the task. And that is something that you're not imagining, because astrologically Saturn has been going through your sign for the most part over the last couple of years. Your modern ruler, the aquatic Neptune, has been in your sign 4 times since 212, apart from its journey earlier this year briefly into Aries. And both of those over the last couple of years have meant that you have had to narrow your focus. You've had to concentrate on what's really important. You haven't necessarily been able to spread yourself as thinly as you may have done in the past. You've had to really prioritise. And as this big opportunity shows up for you, you might not feel that you have the energy or capacity to take on this big chance of a breakthrough. The best way to deal with this is to make sure that you think about your overall situation. We all know that the festive run-up can be very stressful. We're juggling lots of celestial plates, whether it's kids' activities, parties to do with work, maybe in our local community, and therefore this big thrust forwards in terms of your ambitions, goals, work, career, responsibilities does come potentially at a very untimely moment. But I want you to know that however much it feels challenging, with Neptune going direct on the 10th, that can help. Mercury moving back into Sagittarius where it left on the 19th of October, on the 11th, emerging from shadow on the 17th, that's going to help you to find the words and the strategy to juggle the best you can. But also on the 15th, do know that Mars, the planet of action, moves into a friendly part of your situation. Mars can be about our ego in its more negative form, but it also in the 11th house can be an ability to be true to ourselves, but also collaborate. So if you can work collectively with people, even if it means letting people in on your moments of glory in some ways, it's actually going to be a very smart thing to do. Now, we are going to have Mercury emerge from shadow on the 17th and then the new moon on the 20th. And that new moon, rather like Mars and Venus before it, is going to prime up opportunity. But again, it may be a bit of a juggle. And then there could be a chance that comes up for you, a job offer, which in some ways doesn't necessarily allow you to express your individuality quite in the way you want. For example, it may be with a big corporation. It may be in an environment, a sector which is a bit more staid. It's not so fluid or creative. But don't dismiss it. That juggle is just part of the process you need to go through. And know that if you can stay cool with Venus's help, keep the lines of communication open, make sure your personality power and that part of you, the mutable part which can flex, is such a strength of yours. It helps you to survive office politics often. And the link that Venus makes with Saturn and Neptune, again, it may be that someone close to you is not quite getting that you really need to put this opportunity to the fore despite all those different demands, because on the 21st, when the Sun moves into the sign of Capricorn, we have the winter solstice, cardinal quadrant 4 comes in, and a much more sociable dimension starts to shape up for you, followed by Venus on the 24th, and you will find yourself wanting to really release some of the pressure you've been through, to enjoy being with other people, meetups, mixing, mingling, all the things that are very much to do with Christmas. And a lot of those worldly pressures of earlier in the month can start to fade away. And as you go into the new year, despite the fact that Pluto is in a very psychological part of your scope and will be through to 243 initially, before jumping into your sign, leaping back into Aquarius and returning to you in 244, yes, there is a lot of things in your past you do need to let go of, that you need to release, that no longer serve your greater good. But this year ends with a very bright outlook for you, particularly if you are able to marshal your ambition, your drive and your leadership talent with an ability to connect and network to people in a collaborative and cooperative way. You've got it all together. It's just your energy may at times not feel equal to it. Just take one day at a time and prioritize what's really essential for you, and accept you can't do it all. It just isn't going to be possible this month. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link below this video. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for year 2026, you can do so now. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which helps you to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far. The combination of the two will help you to plan your moves in the months ahead so much more effectively. 30% off, free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for each of the 12 signs. Please see the link below for more.